The empty spaces in my home, once filled with Martha's laughter, now echoed with a silence that pressed down on me like a physical weight. After she was gone, the world just blurred. I, Michael, a 52-year-old financial advisor from Boston, who had always prided himself on meticulous planning and sound judgment, found myself adrift. My compass was broken. I tried to find an anchor in a grief support group, a room full of strangers grappling with their own voids. That's where I met Lena. She was different, younger than me, maybe late 30s, with an intensity in her eyes that belied her soft voice. She spoke of her small artisan candle business, Wick and Whimsy, and how it was teetering on the brink. Her story was a familiar one in that room. Loss, betrayal. She claimed her predatory ex-husband had systematically dismantled her finances, leaving her with crushing debt and a dream that was fading fast. There was a raw vulnerability about her, a way she'd look at me as if she saw not just a listener, but someone who understood true pain. And I did. Her struggle, her resilience, it resonated deeply with my own unresolved grief. I found myself drawn to her narrative, to the fierce determination she expressed to keep her dream alive for her young son. It wasn't just sympathy, it was a profound sense of connection, a sudden powerful urge to help, to fix something. Maybe I was trying to fix myself. I saw in Lena a chance to channel my own desolation into something productive, something good. My expertise was finance, and she desperately needed it. I offered advice initially, then a small loan, a few thousand to clear some urgent bills and buy materials. I remember the relief on her face, the way her eyes, usually clouded with worry, sparkled with a fragile hope. It was intoxicating. She talked about a new workshop, a space in a vibrant market, a place where Wick and Whimsy could truly flourish. I imagined her, thriving, building something beautiful, and I felt a flicker of purpose return to my own life. I believed I was giving her not just money, but a fresh start, and in doing so, perhaps, giving one to myself too. The thought felt warm, like the glow of one of her handcrafted candles. The initial success of Wick and Whimsy wasn't spectacular, but it was enough to fuel Lena's captivating vision. She'd bring me sales reports not always perfectly organized, but always brimming with potential, with the promise of future growth. She'd talk late into the night, painting vivid pictures of her unique sense captivating customers, her brand expanding beyond Boston. I saw the passion in her, felt it, and it made me believe. I found myself thinking less about Martha's absence and more about Lena's future. It became less about advice and more about direct investment. A significant portion of my savings, money I had meticulously built over decades, found its way into her business. I rationalized it, saw it as a calculated risk, an investment in a promising venture and a deserving soul. Her earnest pleas, coupled with increasingly ambitious projections, began to chip away at my prudence. She spoke of needing a larger space, of new equipment, of marketing campaigns that would take Wick and Whimsy national. "Michael," she'd say, her voice soft but insistent, "this could be huge, we're on the cusp." She made me feel like a partner, not just an investor, and that feeling, the sense of being needed, of contributing to something vibrant, was addictive. I found myself pushing past my usual cautious nature, past the subtle whispers of doubt that occasionally surfaced. I saw myself as her savior, a strong, steady hand guiding her through treacherous waters. I even refinanced my own home, a place filled with Martha's memories, to pour more capital into her expansion. The thought of losing Martha's house, my sanctuary, was a distant, almost forgotten fear, eclipsed by the bright future Lena promised. The business indeed grew. Her candles were everywhere, online in small boutiques, at local craft fairs. The workshop hummed with activity, the air thick with the sweet, complex scents of beeswax and essential oils. But a nagging unease began to settle over me. The figures, when I pressed her for detailed breakdowns, were often vague, mixed with explanations about unexpected costs, supply chain issues, or sudden marketing opportunities. She was always apologetic, always earnest, always promising to get everything in order next week. I wanted to believe her. I needed to. My entire financial future was intertwined with hers now. The pit in my stomach grew, but I attributed it to the stress of managing such a rapidly expanding enterprise. I didn't want to see what was truly there. The image of the struggling single mother was too powerful, too comforting, too much a reflection of the purpose I had found. I clung to that narrative, even as the first faint cracks began to appear in the perfect facade. My intuition, usually so sharp in my professional life, felt dull, muted by my desperate need to believe. The cracks weren't just faint whispers anymore. They were growing, spider webbing across the picture I had so carefully constructed. I'd ask for specific invoices, for receipts for large expenditures, and Lena would always have an excuse. The accountant was busy, the paperwork was in transit, a supplier had provided a handwritten note instead of a formal bill. My training as a financial advisor screamed at me, but I silenced it, preferring to believe in the narrative of a passionate but disorganized artist over anything more sinister. I found myself doing Lena's bookkeeping, trying to make sense of the tangled web of accounts. Every time I discovered an anomaly, she'd conjure a plausible story. Her eyes wide, her voice laced with a fragility that made me feel like a brute for questioning her. The unease deepened into a constant low thrum of anxiety. My sleep became restless, haunted by shadowy figures of ledgers that wouldn't balance, and promises that felt increasingly hollow. I started withdrawing. My friends, those I still managed to see, noticed a change, a tension in my shoulders that hadn't been there even in the darkest days after Martha. They asked if everything was all right, and I'd offer a vague assurance, a mumbled comment about the pressures of a new investment. I couldn't tell them. I couldn't admit that the purpose I had found was becoming a cage of my own making, that the hope I had clung to was slowly morphing into a suffocating dread. The money was flowing out, but the profits, while reported, never quite matched the grand scale Lena had described. There was always a new expense, a new hurdle. The vibrant market workshop, once a symbol of her rebirth, now felt like a gilded cage, trapping me along with her. The scent of her candles, once comforting, now felt cloying, masking something I couldn't quite identify. I found myself checking Lena's phone when she wasn't looking, a desperate, shameful act, but I always found nothing incriminating, just mundane messages and contacts. My own doubt felt like a betrayal. Then came the subpoena. It wasn't a gentle summons. It was a cold official document, delivered by hand, demanding my presence before the Massachusetts Secretary of the Commonwealth's office. The paper felt heavy in my hands, a death knell. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a shrinking space. They were investigating a series of local business frauds, it stated. My name, Michael, was on a list of associated parties. Associated. The word echoed in my mind, a chilling pronouncement. Lena's name was mentioned too, but not as the victim I knew her to be. It was the first undeniable crack in my carefully constructed reality. The cold fear that had been a distant hum now roared to life. My hands trembled as I read it again and again, trying to find a mistake, an error, anything to disprove the horrifying implication. This wasn't about a struggling business. This was about something far darker. The air in my home, once filled with Martha's warmth, and later with Lena's ambitious dreams, now felt thin, suffocating. The investigation was brutal, an unraveling of everything I thought I knew. I sat across from stern-faced officials answering questions, my voice a hollow whisper. They laid out the facts, cold and irrefutable. Lena's ex-husband, the villain of her narrative, was not a villain at all. He was a legitimate, successful businessman whom she had defrauded years prior, and her entire backstory was a fabrication, a carefully spun web of lies designed to elicit sympathy and, more importantly, capital. The name, the business, the narrative of betrayal, all carefully crafted fiction, the evidence mounted against her a horrifying mosaic of deceit. She had used my investments not for her business's legitimate growth, but to pay off old debts from a pattern of similar scams across multiple states. My money, my home equity, all of it funneled into her scheme, cleverly laundered through the legitimate fraud I had helped her build. My world shattered, my life savings gone, my home refinanced and now a liability. And then the worst blow. I found myself implicated. They weren't accusing me of being a co-conspirator, but an unwitting accomplice, a financial advisor who should have known better, who should have seen the signs. The shame was a visceral thing, a hot flush that spread through me, followed by an icy wave of despair. I, the prudent financial advisor, had been played for a fool. I had lost Martha, and in my desperate attempt to fill that void, I had allowed myself to be stripped bare by another, a phantom of grief and need. The face I saw in the mirror wasn't Michael, the steady, reliable man I'd been. It was a stranger, broken and utterly lost, facing potential criminal charges, his integrity in tatters. The realization was a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless and gasping for air in a world that had suddenly turned upside down. The legal process, agonizingly slow, became my purgatory. I cooperated fully, turning over every scrap of evidence, every email, every vague spreadsheet Lena had ever given me. Each piece of information was a nail in her coffin, but also a fresh wound for me. I relived every moment of my foolish trust, every ignored red flag, every dollar I'd poured into her fabricated dream. The shame was a constant companion, gnawing at my insides. Slowly, painstakingly, the truth emerged, and I was cleared of any charges, my unwitting participation proven. A small victory, yes, but it felt hollow, like winning a battle after losing the war. My name was cleared, my freedom secured, but the cost was immense. My life savings were gone, a phantom limb of my former self. Lena was eventually apprehended in Texas, her trail of deception finally catching up to her. She faced multiple counts of fraud, her carefully constructed world collapsing just as mine had. There was no triumph in her capture for me, only a profound emptiness. The emotional and financial toll was catastrophic. I had to sell my home, Martha's home, the last tangible link to our life together. The house felt like a monument to my gullibility, a silent witness to my undoing. Packing boxes, sifting through memories, it was like burying a part of myself all over again. I felt shattered, adrift once more, but this time with no hope of a new anchor. I had lost everything, not to grief, but to a calculated cruelty I hadn't seen coming. My identity as a reliable financial advisor, a man of sound judgment, had been stripped away. I was left with nothing but the raw, aching wound of betrayal and the daunting task of rebuilding my life from scratch. The silence in my new, smaller apartment was deafening, a stark reminder of the depth of my despair. In the aftermath, Boston felt heavy, burdened with memories and the weight of my mistakes. I needed to escape, to breathe. I returned to my passion for sailing, a solitary pursuit I'd shared with Martha. The ocean, vast and indifferent, offered a strange kind of comfort. Out on the water, with the wind in my face and the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull, the noise in my head quieted. There was a clarity that the land couldn't offer. I spent months like that, just sailing, charting my own course, both literally and figuratively. It was during these solitary journeys that the true realization began to dawn. My desperate need to save Lena hadn't been pure altruism. It had been an unconscious attempt to save myself. My unresolved grief for Martha had left a cavernous void, and Lena, with her tales of woe and vulnerability, had expertly exploited it. I hadn't been helping her. I had been trying to fill my own emptiness, to find purpose in being someone's hero, someone's rescuer. That realization, sharp and painful, was also liberating. I had allowed my own vulnerability to blind me, to make me susceptible to manipulation. But now I could see it. I began volunteering for a local youth sailing program, working with the kids, teaching them the ropes, watching their faces light up as they navigated the waters. It was different. There was no expectation of return, no desperate need for validation. I was simply helping them learn, grow, find their own strength. It was a clean, pure form of giving, untainted by codependency or a need to be saved myself. I found solace in the simple joy of mentorship, in sharing a passion without ulterior motives. My life wouldn't be the same, of course. The financial losses were permanent, a constant, sharp reminder. But I was no longer defined by them. I was rebuilding, not just financially, but emotionally. I was learning to help others without losing myself, to embrace a future free from the deceptive allure of a fabricated need. The horizon, once a blur of uncertainty, now held a bittersweet promise of healing and a quiet, authentic liberation.